what do we do with the body when you die? And it's like, oh, if you could do anything with your body, anything from like being shot out of a cannon to being turned into confetti, who knows?
That would be awesome. Be turned into confetti and then shot out of a cannon.
Yeah.
All right, I'm changing my will. I know what I want now.
Yep.
Welcome to Creative Ops, a podcast for creative people.
Hey, everybody. Christopher Talon, host of this podcast, Creative Ops, a podcast for creative people, and author of the novel Switchers, a time travel story about teens from 1996 who get stuck in a time travel war against their adult selves, who time travel by switching bodies with their younger versions of themselves, sending them into a terrible future. And it's a war to get back to 1996 with a limited amount of time to do so, yada, yada, yada. Look at the show notes, and there will be a link to buy the book that sounds so fascinating right there. All right, this week I talked with Abbey Hunter. She is the owner, founder of the Mortals Cafe, which is on South Division in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It is a coffee shop that specializes in Vietnamese coffee and overall has a theme of death. Yeah, a death-themed coffee shop. So we talk about where the inspiration for the coffee came from, where the inspiration for the death theme came from, how she pulled it all together from a business entrepreneurial standpoint, and also her background as a metalsmith. So a lot going on in this one. There's some art stuff, there's some business stuff, and if you're one of the local people, Grand Rapidians or West Michiganders, here's a little bit more info about a cool place that hopefully you've heard of, and if you haven't, then damn it, get to Mortals Cafe and get one of those coffees that has the whipped egg yolk with the sugar in it. It takes a second to make it, but it's like the sweetest, most delicious thing ever. All right, here's my interview with Abbey. So I guess one thing I don't know, are you from West Michigan originally?
Yeah, born and raised.
From a young age, you had, I guess, an interest in death, right? I think I read somewhere that when you were little, you had thought about becoming a mortician.
Yeah, so that was always, I guess, kind of more or less my plan when I was in high school, was that I would go on and go into mortuary science.
Was that something in your family, or was that just something that was uniquely you?
No, my grandfather briefly worked as a mortician,
Okay.
or at least I don't know his involvement in the morgue. I know at one point it was his job to pick up the bodies.
So like when somebody's like, hey, Grandpa Joe died, somebody come grab him and take him to where his body needs to go next, and that he would go and pick people up from wherever they died and bring them to whatever not supply, what's the word I'm looking for? Like temporary storage place that they would put bodies, I guess.
Yeah, or a morgue.
Yeah, there you go.
They don't really have like body freezers for that. Actually, it was one of the more memorable stories of my grandfather was he had to pick up this unfortunate suicide case where this guy hung himself behind a door of this inside of the apartment, and it was kind of a struggle trying to get in, like through the door, because the body was keeping that door shut. But they eventually managed to get through that door and like get the body down and bring the body back in. But this was when he was first starting to date my grandmother, and
that must have been some interesting "how was work today" conversations.
Oh gosh, even more than that. Apparently, my grandfather moved into that apartment, unbeknownst to my grandmother. So
that's one way to find an apartment. You're the first person that knows when it's up.
Yeah, great place just opened up.
Yeah. So you heard those stories from him firsthand?
Yeah, and that always just kind of intrigued me. The idea of being that close to death and interacting with it and caring for those bodies and working with them behind the scenes. And I always thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And he would always tell me the process of like what goes into, and again, like then it's like you either get cremated or you get embalmed, and
Yeah.
a little bit about the embalming process. And it was always intriguing. And I guess I thought, oh, that could be kind of a cool job.
Huh.
Bodies and dead things don't really weird me out. And
Yeah, I was going to say, you
to-
never got that paralyzing fear that a lot of kids get when they're like, wait, mom and dad, you're going to die someday and I'm going to die someday?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I was also very heavily involved in like nature. We had like a pretty good woods behind our house. So seeing dead things and understanding the cycle of life.
Yeah.
My mom is amazing and always kind of made us understand that cycle. And it was just, I was never really scary.
Yeah.
Because
it was you saw it and it was talked about appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, which is something that when I first heard about your shop, probably probably when it was on the news, one of the times that it was on the news. Congratulations on all the on all the coverage. It was nice too because it gave me a lot of backstory too to work with, which is nice. I don't get that with a lot of guests. Especially then in West Michigan too is very likes to talk about how we're all on the up and up, all the good things that are happening with the growth, and having a death themed shop kind of doesn't stand against the current, but it definitely doesn't go with everything else like that too around here.
It can be a bit of a buzzkill, I think, for some folk. But yeah, that's exactly why I made this death-centric cafe.
Yeah.
Just because it's not just, people on their outs, elderly dying. It's young people. It's very young people. It's people of all ages. Death is, the great equalizer. There's no, it happens to all of us at whatever point in our lives. And, it's almost like if we don't talk about it, then it's not going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
we need to be able to have these conversations. Otherwise, people just completely isolate themselves and feel isolated by the rest of society, especially if they're like in their mid-20s and going through cancer treatment, and they may not survive, but they still have friends, they still want to go live their life. But
yeah,
it can be really tough dealing with grief and the heaviness that, oh, this person that's my friend is actually slowly dying and I don't know how to deal with it. So I'll just not correlate or associate with that person.
So for you, was it a personal experience or a culmination of experiences that really made you go, death themed? I kind of want to go death themed because while you were at Grand Valley is when you came up with this idea from what I read. And were you already going to school for business or something else?
I was actually going for my art degree, so metalsmithing, something entirely different. But because I've always loved the theme of death and dying, there were a handful of classes that dealt with that, and I took those classes. Anything from the anatomy and physiology of death and dying to death and dying in Hispanic literature. And it just made me realize, and that's where I first realized about death cafes as a social gathering where anybody can host a death cafe. It doesn't have to be in a cafe. It could be someone's house. It could be a church. It could be a library, wherever. And just have casual conversations around death and dying and our own mortality. And I thought, oh, I love food, I love travel, and I want to take this concept and turn it into an actual coffee shop cafe with resources and, consistent conversations around death.
And did you come upon this through studying, through just kind of your own interest? Did you actually see this because what they started in around 2010, something like that in England, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Actually,
did you see this
before that,
traveling, or did you just kind of come across it some other way?
no, I came across it in college. That was where I first heard about it in one of
Okay.
our death and dying classes, and I thought, oh, this could be cool, in an actual cafe.
Yeah. So when did the real idea of like, I think I'm gonna do this? When did that come into play? While you were still in school or shortly thereafter?
I've always had like a really strong set for entrepreneurship. It's just I never really had, I guess, the confidence to start anything. And it wasn't until I started my metal studio where it's like, oh, okay, like I can do this.
Mm,
And then the pandemic hit and I had to shut my metal studio down and I worked part-time outside in the earth, digging up soil, like making compost.
mm,
And it allowed me to connect with other chefs, but also have like the freedom for creativity. And it allowed me to really get back into what I was passionate about, which
mhm.
was, conversations around death and dying, but also like food and being able to offer a little bit of something from like my worldly travels. And that was probably end of 2020. And I don't know like what bit me in the fall of 2020. But as soon as I got back from Maine, I was like, fuck, like I want to open up this death centric coffee shop.
Mm,
Like I saw a lot of really cool things that people were doing out in like Maine, Acadia National Park, Portland area. Like I was all over Maine and I wanted to come back and I was just like dead set on starting up this coffee shop. And that was when I connected with Alicia of Little Space Studios.
yeah,
And
yeah.
she was like, hey, yeah, come to think of that, like we've got a, co-work space and we've been wanting to get a coffee shop in here. And then it was like light bulbs and fireworks and we made it happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can we talk just a little bit about the metalworking stuff? I have seen you post a few things on Instagram, but I didn't realize that was like when you meet somebody, you just kind of assume how you meet them now is just kind of how they've always been. So
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, oh, she also does that. But it's kind of blowing my mind to know now that you started as a metal artist and then moved into the coffee thing. So
Yeah.
how does one get into working with metal as art? Is that something that you pick up from watching somebody that you know, or is it something you just kind of for some reason have an interest in and just kind of learn about on your own?
So when I went to Grand Valley for like art and metalsmithing, it was really just a focus on jewelry making.
Okay.
Um, which is what I did, and it's why I started up the metal studio, was so that people could continue and have a space for making jewelry using fine metals. But then when I graduated, I needed a part-time job just to pay the bills, and that was when I started working at Founders.
Hmm.
And the lead welder who was there at the time, he was like, hey, grab a hood, grab a jacket, and I'm going to teach you about welding. And so I like zero welding background. And here I was in this brewery and he taught me everything I know about stainless steel sanitary welding.
Hmm.
And he was like the grisliest, crustiest guy ever. But he was an absolute gentleman and he fought for me to be there. Because originally, like a lot of the higher up guys, they really did not want a woman, quote unquote, working on their machines. And he went upstairs and just pulled all their heads out of their asses. And yeah, and that's what really allowed me to continue like welding and learning all the ins and outs of like TIG and MIG. And yeah.
I don't know
It
what TIG and MIG are.
TIG, sorry. TIG welding is like tungsten inert gas. It's the one where you manually feed it in, and then MIG is metal inert gas, and it's the one where it's a lot of splashing metal and bright lights, and it sprays everywhere. And yeah,
Sounds kind of fun, but
it's totally fun. TIG is usually reserved for like more fine tuning sanitary welds where you don't really want a lot of like gases and spatter everywhere because everything's just got to be very, very clean. Whereas MIG is great for like more industrial structural stuff.
when I was in the military, one of the options that I could have done was welding, but they just pulled me and had me do something else instead. But I remember guys saying that when you're welding stuff like that, you want it to look like somebody has like a, what do they call it? Like a diagonal row of pennies just all in a perfect line or something like that.
Yeah, they say like a neat stack of dimes. Just
Yeah, there you go.
tipped over and spread. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so that would be the MIG style welding.
Both of them actually. It's just one is like you click the button and you got a spool of wire and that's being fed into what you're welding. And TIG is your manual, you hold the wire itself and you're dipping into a puddle and moving along. Yeah.
I'm sure you explained it perfectly the first time, but now it makes sense to me.
It's tough, like visual, like when you're trying to explain a visual.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So you did you complete a full education at Grand Valley in that concentration then?
Correct. Yeah. And I graduated with like metalsmithing, jewelry, and design in 2010.
Okay. And then the shop opened in the coffee shop opened in 2021?
Early 2021.
Early 2021. Okay. What did it take you to get the store running? What was it from like, I'm actually going to do this till opening day? Like how much time goes by and what are some of the steps that people don't realize go into just even starting a business before you open it?
Oh gosh. Oh, this was like a really big learning curve. Because to be completely honest, I had never worked in a coffee shop before. So not only
just
was
a lot
there,
of firsts, huh?
Oh, how do I like make coffee? How do I use this machine? How do I steam milk? Like, what are the ratios? So there was just a ton of just research going into that.
Yeah.
But
and where are you going to get all your stuff too? Because I'd love to know, you finish where you were going to go, but I'd love to know where you got all your suppliers too.
Yeah. Let's see. I talked to Rosie over at Littlefoot Coffee, which is where I source my coffee from.
Yeah.
And she provided me with like a good idea of like the espresso machine that, you want to use and it's good for, mid-grade startup. And yeah, a lot of like the bar top was already there. A lot of the plumbing was already there. So it was just like plug and play.
Mm-hmm.
So that aspect was pretty easy, but there was like, okay, like I've got a menu. Cool. Now I need like standard operating procedures for all of these drinks.
Yeah.
And, if there's certain, I forget the terminology, but like certain, like allowances or like doing things a little bit differently or like, like we offer raw egg for our egg coffee or Café Tron, which is where you take Vietnamese coffee and top it with whipped egg yolk and sugar. And it's like, that's a raw egg yolk. And, we need to be able to, let the consumer know that consuming raw, undercooked product can be hazardous to your health and pregnant people. So it was just like all those little codes, permits, like having to go online, michigan.gov, and get the LLC written
Yeah.
up and like let the health department know what we were trying to do.
Yeah, that's one of the things because a friend of mine used to have uh like a Michigan themed gift shop, and he wanted to open a coffee shop too. This was in Lansing a few years back, and he was like, "Yeah, you've got to get the health people on board, but then the fire guy has to come in and inspect everything." And it's like the fire guy has to come in, like it's already in things. Like I don't know, somebody you just got to get
Yeah.
everybody in the city to come by and sign off on it, basically.
Yep. Yeah, so that was like a wild process. And then at some point, like the health department lost my application. So I'm just like, trying to, polish up the coffee shop and, get things running and just kind of like twiddling my thumbs. And I'm like, man, maybe I should, email them. It's been a couple months because I was ready to fly back in February.
Yeah.
So February, March, April comes around and it's like, oh, maybe I should reach out, poke them, whatever. I really want to get going with this. And right now I'm just kind of losing money.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh yeah, turns out we lost it in a cabinet. Do you still want to do this? And it's like, yeah, I mean, you cashed the check back in February, so by all means, please send somebody down and inspect my facility and give me the green light, please.
Yeah.
But they've actually been like incredibly wonderful to work with. Any questions that I have, and they're quick to respond, and
That's good.
so they're an asset more than they are a hindrance.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because you need them, but it's good that they give you a little back in return too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've had not all the coffees and teas, but I've had a pretty good selection of them. And almost everything that I've had there, it was the first time that I've had any of it because there really aren't a lot of Vietnamese coffee shops, at least not around here. So if you would kind of tell me what was your travel experience that brought you to, of all the coffees of the world, Vietnamese coffees, and you were like, this is it. This is what I'm serving.
Yeah, it's everywhere you go generally serves Arabica coffee beans. And when I went to Vietnam, oh gosh, probably back in 2014, that was the first time I encountered Robusta. And it was strong, it was sweet, it was iced, and I'm like, good God, why don't we serve this in America?
Yeah. It's so good.
Lo and behold, there's like a lot of reasons why it's not in coffee shops, and a lot of it is just biases and a little bit of racism and the market that kind of takes advantage of these countries.
Yeah.
But it was just like, wow, this is something that I want to serve in my coffee shop. But as far as like where to source it, I had no idea. I know sometimes traditionally the Café du Monde is used to make quote unquote Vietnamese coffee, but it's like, no, like fist on the table, I am making Vietnamese from Vietnam Robusta coffee, but there was no way to really source it. But I ended up finding Win Coffee Supply out in Brooklyn. I think since then she's moved to New York. But
do you mean Brooklyn, New York, or Brooklyn, Michigan?
Brooklyn, New York. Yeah.
Okay. Just curious because there is a Brooklyn, Michigan for people that are like, why would he even ask that? There's a NASA NASCAR race that they do there. It's, there's something there.
Okay. Yeah. No, I had no idea there was a Brooklyn, Michigan.
Yeah.
Like,
the Michigan International Speedway is.
Yeah. But yeah, she's out in Brooklyn, and as soon as I found that she serves like 100% pure Robusta coffee, I was like, heck yes. And started brewing it up, and it It's perfect. It takes me back to Vietnam, and it is exactly what I want people to experience. And and you can get Vietnamese coffee here. It's just you typically would have to go to a Vietnamese restaurant. Um, I have not seen it in any coffee shops otherwise, and not everybody wants to, pop into the Vietnamese restaurant at 8 a.m. for a coffee to go.
Yeah.
If they've been open that early, I don't think they are.
Yeah, especially if you don't know much about the drinks either, because like you said, if you're not going to find much around here just on a casual, hey, let's go find a place that's got some Vietnamese coffee. So when you finally are confronted with it and you just hear, oh, there's egg in it, I don't know, you know what I mean? It's a very, especially around here, it's a very meat and potatoes kind of community. So
yeah. Oh, people either are like what you mentioned, are like kind of hesitant, but then you get some people that are like, oh, hell yeah, sign me up.
yeah.
And yeah, I have a lot of like followers and enthusiasts for this egg coffee now.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I'm pretty sure that was the one I made a post about one time. And yeah, it was one of my more popular reels too.
Yeah.
People are just like, Vietnamese coffee? Interesting.
Yeah.
So and then as far as finding the ingredients, because like you said, you found this person in New York. Was that just like through some of these other coffee connections, or was that through just some intense Googling, or what?
Oh gosh, I think I just started following coffee centric people on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I cannot remember like where it came up, or maybe it was a Google search trying to find Robusta coffee. Because since then, like even her company has blown up and gone really national since then.
Good for them.
Yeah.
And then the milk you said you get from the condensed milk that you get from one of the local markets.
Yeah, yep. It's the oh gosh, I keep wanting to call it Golden Palace. But that's the name of the restaurant that's in it. The Kim Yong supermarket.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of our local Vietnamese Asian supermarket.
Yeah. Was it hard to find something, or as soon as you found that place where you're like, oh, this place will have what I need?
Yeah, I knew they would have what I need. But then sometimes they don't always have it, so I kind of have to go to the grocery store but I just try to find whichever one is just like straight up milk and sugar. Some of the other sweetened condensed milks will have other additives, and I just try to go for, whatever is simple.
Yeah. Okay, so as far as putting the menu together, do you how do you do that? I'm sure you had in your mind some of the stuff that you wanted to have already, but then you have to learn how to make all these drinks. Are you going to the library, getting a bunch of different books? Are you asking people to show you how to make things? Did you already kind of know how to make them?
Yeah, so it was a lot of like YouTube. I bought a couple books on like being a barista and what goes into like how to tamp and, grams input versus output and all of that stuff. I did connect with, I had a couple baristas come in and taught me how to steam milk and how to tamp properly. And a lot of trial and error. There was, because I also just don't really go to a lot of coffee shops just because I'm just poor and it's not a luxury I care to really, indulge in.
Yeah.
So it was, but I knew like what tasted good. And I initially kept my menu pretty simple with like, here's a latte and here's an espresso. And but then it's like I had more people coming in and they're like, oh, could I have a cortado? Could I have a cappuccino? And I was just like, oh man, I guess I really gotta even though they may not be on the menu, people still want these drinks and I should know how to make them and and what goes into a good Americano.
So you basically were the professor and student. You were outlining your own curriculum and then learning it all at the same time.
Yeah, yep. And that was why I didn't entirely mind that it took us until July to be, or July to be official with our coffee shop officially opening.
Yeah. Once everything didn't get lost and finally got pushed all the right through places.
Yeah, I know. It gave me a few months to kind of hone in on certain ratios and recipes.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. that's one good lesson, right? Is there's always something you can do with that extra time if you find that extra time on your hands.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. There was also, it's weird because you could be so excited to start something up and get it going. And by the time you actually launch it, you're absolutely terrified. And I can't explain it. I don't entirely know why that is. Maybe it's like the fear of failure or like, oh, damn, now I actually have to run this thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's the same thing that I've heard champions in combat sports talk about how, even when they're the best fighter in the world, they still feel like they're going to throw up right before they walk out of the dressing room. And I think part of that's just like fear of failure, but also like, oh shit, I'm really doing this. There's no turning back now.
Yeah. There's no back pedal.
Yeah. Everything sounds great when it's an idea, but now when you're really doing it, it's like, okay, now it's actually on my shoulders and I got to make it happen.
Yeah, it's a vulnerability because now it's a part of your soul, a part of your idea, your design that now is going public. And yeah.
As far as getting publicity for your place, because it seems like when you opened, almost immediately everyone in town was like, ooh, let's go talk about this place. So how much of that was you behind the scenes going like, hey, just so you know, I've got this place open, and how much of it was just people going, oh, it's a cool new thing, let's go talk about it?
Oh God, it was the ripple effect. Because I was so excited but also scared to finally open, I love just quietly putting a good thing into the world.
Yeah.
Just letting it go do its own thing organically. So a lot of the media and write-ups surrounding this coffee shop have been entirely organic. I did not reach out to anybody. I am antisocial as hell. But it was kind of also frustrating because I had never really knew how the media worked.
Yeah.
So it was, one place getting a hold of me going like, oh, this is really cool. We'd love to talk to you. And they would write an article, and then other news outlets would steal. I don't want to say steal. Apparently, it's totally a normal thing to do for other media outlets to grab what somebody else wrote, and put it under a different title, but change a few things around. But they would get that information wrong. So then it was just having to backtrack certain things, and it was just we're called Cafe and Confection, but we're just a small startup right now. We'll eventually get to that. But people were showing up demanding pastries, and they clearly did not know the distinction between pastries and confections. So it was just kind of a hot media mess.
Uh,
But there were some really great connections from that. But no, I did not actually seek out attention. It just kind of like blew up, and it did pretty well for our coffee shop in the beginning. I mean, we weren't slammed. In fact, we were pretty slow, but it's good. It was like a really good. I was worried that I'd need to immediately hire people. But no, we were pretty well hidden and tucked away within the confines of downtown Grand Rapids, where we're kind of like a little secret treasure hunt. So only the worthy could find us.
Yeah, well, I remember walking into the shop within the first few months after it opened, and got a coffee and was like, "Oh, this place is cool." And then I came back a few months later, and I was like, "Whoa, this looks like a different place."
Yeah. Yeah. It was a constant evolution.
Yeah, I don't know if the library was there, if it was as stocked up as it was, but then all the decorations, and I don't know if the hanging chair was there.
Oh yeah, I busted that out again. It was, I don't know, we'll find like cool things in the building and it's like, oh, why isn't this? Let's bring this out. This is great.
Yeah. So when did you start hiring people? Because I'm trying to think how many different people I've seen working for you back there. 2 or 3 at least, right?
Yeah, it's myself and 2 others.
Okay.
And it wasn't until September that I hired my first person. So about 2-3 months after I officially opened.
And now you're writing W-2s and signing checks. How's that feel?
Oh God, terrible. It's not like my favorite part of the business. That was a whole like technology. I am awful with technology. So trying to, sign up for unemployment insurance and like payroll, and it's not just that you pay this person $800. You also have to pay like the $200 for unemployment insurance, and then like the $32 and some other percentage for this company to do that for you. So it was just kind of really eye-opening to see what all goes into a paycheck, very simple paycheck.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Funny story about unemployment stuff. I remember somebody, it was during the pandemic, somebody I knew was unemployed, and said, "Hey, I'm trying to get unemployment. Can I write you down as a reference saying that I was going to do some work in your house, but then this happened and then I couldn't?" I was like, I don't know. Let me ask. I asked somebody who was a bookkeeper, and they're like, "No, because then you're going to have to pay that person's unemployment." I was like, "Oh, sorry, no."
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, which is another thing that people don't think about. That money doesn't just like come out of nowhere. They don't just pull it out of the reserve. The employer has to pay that.
Yep.
Which is bananas in its own way, but I guess also like a protection for workers, which I don't know. Do you have any different opinion now on people who own businesses now that you've been running? Well, you've had a couple, I guess, now, versus when you were somebody who was more in a position of being a worker. Because I know some people are like, "Man, people who own businesses are screwing us all over." And then I know people who own businesses are like, "Man, you don't know the half of what it takes to run this thing."
Yes. And I've always had some kind of idea, just being business inclined. And that was always my hesitancy for starting a business. Because while I didn't know all the intricacies of running and starting and operating a business, I knew there was just so much more than just, your quarterly taxes and your sales tax, and then you got to pay your employees. But I mean, there was, now that I'm in the thick of managing a business, I really wish there were more conversations so that people could understand like what all, like I am currently free labor for my business, and like it's not so easy to like, God, fuck, I wish I could give my employees $20 an hour.
Yeah.
But there's so much that goes into, again, it's like you pay more in all these other areas. And it's not, you have to like very cautiously step forward with each raise. And, I don't think, I mean, some of these bigger corporations, I'd like to see not so much like a minimum wage, but a maximum wage. Because some of these CEOs are getting like, holy shit, like $500,000 salary.
Yeah.
While their lowest paid employee can barely get a living wage.
Yeah.
Can barely make ends meet.
Yeah.
And
I've talked to nurses in the area that have been going through that, where they said for the last 12 years, I've lost money based on inflation, regardless of what, market raise they've given me. And meanwhile, the person who runs the hospital makes $1 million a year.
Yeah. It's that, see, I get there are definitely, I have heard horror stories of small businesses completely abusing their staff, anything from like not paying out like credit card wage tips to,
or not paying their overtime, which was something that a business got pinched for here recently.
Oh yeah. Yes. Gosh, I remember hearing about that. So like definitely small businesses, they can, they are just as guilty. But some of these big corporations where it's like, okay, you can do better.
Yeah.
You clearly have the money if like your doctors or the CEO of this hospital is getting $1 million.
Yeah. If you're giving out corporate bonuses, maybe stop and pay people that have been working somewhere for 10 to 15 years, or even someone who's been working there for a year. Just
like if you
make life a little easier.
A couple of yachts, and a beach house in Florida, maybe you sell it and give everybody some bonuses and
quit being a dick about it.
Yes, prove to us that trickle down actually can work. But it's made me like be more cognizant of how to move forward and how to grow.
Yeah.
And I've fully come to the realization that I can't actually get a paycheck until we're about 5 years in and everybody on my team is stable.
Yeah. I've heard that a lot from people too. Like they say, we pay our employees and then we get paid if there's money left over. It's like, and people are like, people can shit on people who own businesses, kind of like using the LLC as their personal bank account. But it's like a lot of times they don't actually have a personal bank account.
Yeah. I do personally try to keep everything separate so that like at the end of the quarter, I'm not like, trying to use personal funds for paying quarterly taxes or, vice versa.
Yeah. Right.
And if I eat beans and rice for a week, I eat beans and rice for a week.
Could be worse. At least you get the beans and rice.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't want to talk to you and not talk about some of the different things that you do, non-food related, some of the like different programs and special events and things that you do. Like I'm trying to remember what the event was. I brought my daughters and you had like tea for 2 sets out and was that a Valentine's Day thing maybe?
Oh, I can't remember.
It was like last summer sometime. It might have been during one of the markets. Yeah. Okay, that's what it was. Yeah. So you do different events, some death themed, some not necessarily death themed, some in the grieving category, and some just kind of in the let's talk about it category. What were the first types of things that you had started? Like, what was foremost in your mind? Like, okay, we got to start somewhere. This is the first thing that we're gonna offer as a program / event.
Yeah, so the first one was exactly what got me started on this death-centric coffee shop, was like hosting consistent death cafes, which is where we just sit around and anybody can pop in and we talk about death, dying, mortality.
And without getting too specific, do those conversations kind of like, are they funny sometimes? Are they sad sometimes? Are they just kind of deep? Or are people like asking questions that they've never been able to ask before? I've never gone to one, so I'm kind of curious. I should drop in sometime.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it is all of the above. So we will get people that maybe have like recently lost somebody and just want to not feel alone, or they have been struggling with like a terminal illness and they're like, all right, I'm gonna die soon and I'm just gonna talk about it with people.
Yeah.
We've had those kind of people pop in. We've had people that just love the topic of death and dying, so they show up pretty consistently. And then we get some people that can take death and dying to a bit of a ridiculous, in nature, where it's like, oh, what do we do with the body when you die? And it's like, oh, if you could do anything with your body, anything from like being shot out of a cannon to being turned into confetti, who knows?
That would be awesome. Be turned into confetti and then shot out of a cannon.
Yeah.
All right, I'm changing my will. I know what I want now.
Yep. But yeah, it's a lot of like really intriguing conversations. Sometimes we do get really deep into what happens to our spirit, what is our spirit. And, inevitably it kind of taps into religion. And for the most part, people are pretty non-denominational, but we do get a few inside personal views of like Christians that have popped in. Some have been like more Buddhist background and philosophy on what happens to us when we die. But it's always been pretty respectful. I think I was not hosting it for the when this happened, but we had like one of our houseless neighbors pop in, and I think they kind of like, it kind of turned into like everybody asking that person questions about like death and being close to death on the streets and what that's like. So it was, yeah, we get a good mix.
Yeah. And so that one started out being kind of, I guess, of the two, the more lighthearted, but then you've since started like actual grief groups for people. Like, I listened to you on what was it called, the Emotional Duct Tape podcast, and one of the things you were talking about then was having a grief group for people who've lost pets.
Yeah. Yep. So that was like a kind of a one and done. We had this woman come in. It's just she leads a lot of these grief groups for people that have lost pets. And she came to me and wanted me to host space for her to have this. And yeah, I thought it was great.
Because that's heavy. Like I have a pet, but I also have 4 kids. So like, I think when my pet dies, I'll be like, well, that's sad. But like, I know people that don't have kids and their pets are like, they're little babies. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I know some people that have kids and their pets are still their little babies.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, pets are just like, they are so unconditional. I mean, yeah, kids can hate you and then they get to their teen years and they're difficult, but pets, oh man, like you could be having the worst day ever and they'll still greet you with a wagging tail. And they're too good for us, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was always worried that like when we had my kids really wanted a pet. They're like, can we get a dog? And we're like, no, that's a little bit much. The barking, the everything. Cats still a little bit too much. And then finally they were like, well, how about a bunny? They're really cheap. They don't make any noise. And I was like, okay. But part of me was like, I'm going to like kick this thing when I get mad at it, or one of my kids is going to like throw it when they get mad at it. But I've seen my son go from like, I'm like, just go pet the bunny. And he walks in there, and within seconds, he's like breathing slower and just calm and stroking the bunny. I'm like, oh, wow, that's more than, talking it out or going for a walk could do.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. What else is going to be going on here, this spring and this summer that people can look forward to over at the Mortals Cafe?
Oh gosh, there's some things potentially in the works. I'd love to put together a death-centric book club.
Yay.
That can meet up either once a month or quarterly, depending on time. But I was also chatting with an individual who does archiving and like digital archiving, whether it's in the form of like taking photos and digitizing them, or recording stories from people. So I would really like to have her come in and lead a workshop or a discussion around like how you can archive like your memories. Photos either from yourself or your children or your parents, grandparents, but just a way to kind of like ironclad them to the times, and something that can be easily transferable.
Yeah, that's really cool. Because I remember when, it was probably from like one of those like hand crank home cameras from when my dad was like real little, but they had gotten a hold of some ancient tapes that didn't have any sound or anything, and they had converted those to VHS, back when I was a little kid. And I remember everybody like looking at people that they hadn't seen in decades for the first time and just started crying. I was like, wow, this is special stuff that people don't think about, like how important it is to save those kinds of memories, because they will eventually, technology will just make them useless eventually.
Yeah. Yep. Because even like you might be able to have something in a digital file, but geez, the way technology is progressing, like give it 50 years and suddenly that little MP3 player chip disk drive thing on your laptop computer is gonna, I don't know technology, so I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just throwing random words out there. But yeah, suddenly we're gonna get to a point where it's like, man, like, we had the same issue with VHS, where it's like, how do we take VHS and make it digital?
Yeah, because for a while you could convert them to DVD, but even now DVD, unless you have a DVD player somewhere or you've got like an Xbox who's watching DVDs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is actually funny because just the other night my wife and I watched Captain Ron on DVD in an Xbox.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness.
I love that movie. Sorry, that has nothing to do with this podcast or anything that we talked about, but I love Captain Ron.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Oh, man. When my next book comes out, which will probably end up being like next year, just based on some stuff that's going to be happening next year, I'll have to give that to you. And if you guys have a book club, then they might be into it. It's not really about like dying. It's fiction, but somebody dies like in the first couple pages, and then somebody dies right after that. And then there's a person who can go back and forth into the land of the freshly dead, but then they, kind of like dissolve and go to where they eventually go. But
I'd say that's still like death centric enough.
It's pretty death centric, and there's like Grim Reapers in it and stuff like that. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I will give that a read, and it might be our inaugural book club book.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Maybe we could do an event at the cafe or something.
Sounds good. Yeah, absolutely.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you some deep questions that you propose to some of your clients sometimes.
Yeah.
If you died today and you had to pick your headstone right now, what would it say on it?
Oh my goodness. Oh, girl finally got to sleep. Um, yeah.
That's a good one. I think I looked at it that on one of the coffee sleeves one time, and I think I just wrote I would put on mine something like "I had a blast." Just have it say that on my headstone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, do you have a strong conviction about what happens to a person or a person's soul or whatever uh ephemeral being might hold us together? What happens to a person after they die? Do you believe in reincarnation, heaven, or are you kind of a lights out but it was fun kind of person, or what?
Oh gosh. I'd say more or less a lights out, but it was fun. Um, but I do believe in something with like the energy that we have and that we consume and that we work with on a day-to-day basis and how it transfers to the rest of living and even like non-living things throughout the universe. So I don't know. Yeah, our body goes back into soil, but I do see our spirits as like an energy that can just get rippled through everything else
Yeah.
and gets turned back in.
Yeah. I'd like to believe in reincarnation in some form, but I do believe, I think I've kind of oversimplified it as saying like I believe in something kind of like the Force.
Yeah.
Where, it's so there's some energy field that, we all came from and then go back to. It might not necessarily be like a consciousness, but yeah, there's some kind of energy because, I go back to the old principle of energy can neither be created nor destroyed. And it takes
Yeah.
energy to fuel all this. It came from somewhere, it's going to go somewhere.
Oh God, we're gonna die and find out midichlorians are actually real.
Yeah. Hey guys, just so you know, Star Wars, that should have been the Bible.
That, yep.
Well,
Turns
all right.
out Star Wars was right. Star Wars had it right.
George Lucas, the patron saint of science fiction. All right. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to say? Um, podcast related, business related, creativity related before we get going?
Uh, no, not that I could think of. This was great.
Yeah, cool. I'm glad especially somebody who's been in the news with their business a lot, but it's all in just, a paragraph here, one or two quotes. It's fun to dig around and find out what the real motivations are and how things really work, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So take that, local news. You suck. I'm just kidding. I'm friends with some of the people in the local news. They do a good job.
No,
Um, but yeah, thank you for giving me a place to sell books for a while when I was a member at Little Space. That was great. And the coffee is amazing. The theme is unique and timely, I think, right now. So I appreciate everything that you're doing too inside of the business with those groups and the grief sessions and the game nights and everything. It's fun because I think Dante Cope had put something out on Facebook the other day, like Grand Rapids gentrified itself out of something to do. And but if you look, there's cool, unique little places like Mortals that offer people fun and unique, interesting things to do. So thank you for being part of the culture here.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope to actually boost it even more over the years if God, there's so much I'd like to change, especially for Division and
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a cool area coming around there. The 106 has something going on every Thursday. Little Space always has something going on a couple times a month. You've got stuff going on. Art Rat,
Yeah.
GR
Yeah.
Noir. It's a cool
Yep.
place. I don't think people give it the respect it deserves yet, but they will.
We will. Yep. We just need to keep being persistent, keep our spaces running, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, Abby, thank you so much. I don't know if you can see me. Thank you. For coming on and for putting something into Grand Rapids that it needed rather than just one more of something that it already had.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I'll see you around. I'll be by the shop probably actually sometime this week. I don't know if you'll be around the whole time, but
Yeah,
not,
pretty
I'll
much
stop by
here
and say
every
hi.
day. So
Right on. Then yeah. Thank you. Everybody still listening. Thank you for listening. Go to the Mortals Cafe in Grand Rapids. It's the fucking coolest place ever.
awesome. I'll see you around, man.
All right, take care. Thank you, everybody, for listening to my conversation with Abbey Hunter, owner of the Mortals Cafe and Confections on South Division in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Check the show notes for all the info you need, and I will see you next time. Goodbye. Mwah! Love you guys.